Well, this is a man I always enjoy chatting to, Harold Hillman, who's an executive coach. G'day.
Good morning, Roman.
We're going to talk about the signs of a dysfunctional team.
Yes.
And do you know what? I sound like a real negative person. I don't like the word team.
Team?
No? Because to me, you're not playing rugby, so shut up with your team stuff. And you're always made to feel like, oh, you're not a team player. Well, I am, but I don't think everyone has to be the same in a team.
Now, what word would you use instead of team?
I don't know. When did team become a word?
I don't know, actually.
For work as opposed to sport.
Yeah. It's look, I use the analogy of a sports team. With one of my clients, I had the opportunity to work with Sterling Murtlock, the former captain of the Wallabies. And he would say he joined this company and he had a conversation with the executive team about the fact that in companies we talk about team, but yet we don't necessarily demonstrate it in the way that sports teams do, because ultimately the goal is to win. So you can't really, focus on your part. Even if you do well, if the team doesn't win, it's not successful. So there is a mentality around sports teams. You will find that a lot in business, that there are a lot of examples from the sports world, because ultimately, if you don't get it across the line, you're not going to be successful. And that mentality doesn't necessarily translate to the corporate world.
Just before we get on to the signs of a dysfunctional team, if you are seen as an outlier, you're not a team player, why can't you just be yourself and be an individual?
There's an inherent tension between fitting in and standing out. So there is this notion of you have to fit in well enough to sort of gain the trust of those who are on the team, but not lose yourself there. Not to turn off the volume on your voice or to turn it down, but to keep yourself relevant and to be able to bring it. In New Zealand, I've discovered after living here for 16 years, Roman, that there is more emphasis on team as opposed to individual. Whereas in the States, on a team, you do get to sort of express yourself a bit differently without it necessarily being a stigma. Here we call it the tall poppy syndrome.
We do. If you are shining out and being a bit different and someone says, oh, you're not being a team player, you actually could be a leader because you could be inspirational. It could be good differences within that team, right?
That's right, yeah. Ultimately, if you want to stand out in the interest of the team, as opposed to standing out for your own gain, your own personal gain.
Yeah. So running around the office naked is not a great idea, but having great ideas and putting them forward to a team, I've thrown you completely with the naked talk, right?
I was still getting that image in my head.
You're scarred for life now. Hey,
that's right.
What are the symptoms, the classic symptoms of a dysfunctional team?
I recommend a book. The best-selling book on teams ever is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and it's written by Patrick Lencioni. And when I work with teams, I actually ask the members of the team to read the book. It's written as a fable about a new CEO who comes into a company and she inherits a dysfunctional team. There are 5 dysfunctions that you want to focus on. The first one is trust, and that goes to the heart of connection in relationships. And so an absence of trust means that we aren't necessarily candid with each other. We don't connect well. We haven't invested the time to, immerse ourselves in the relationships. If you don't have trust, then it's going to impact on how you work your way through conflict. And so dysfunctional teams typically have safe conversations because they don't have sufficient investment in relationship yet to be able to tell the truth. You're more likely to tell the truth and be candid with a person who you trust. So if that's not there, you typically don't get candid conversations. You don't get the degree of conflict you need. And then from that, there's a lack of commitment. And that is, after we get up from this table and walk out the door, we all go do our own thing. We may nod. You know how people nod a lot. Nod yes to the team leader who says, are we all on board? But then when we leave the room,
can't stand that guy.
Can't stand that guy.
Such a jerk.
Can't stand them. You get back to your own team.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily consider the team you just stepped away from your team. You consider the team you're going back to as your team.
Hey, just going back to the trust thing, is
Yeah.
the use of email, even texting, whatever you write electronically, there's a fear factor. If I put this in writing, how will this be used?
Yeah. I just had this conversation with a team last week, Roman, in terms of the email etiquette and what's appropriate to discuss. And the team agreed that if they are working through any kind of conflict with another person, to avoid doing that on email, to go sit down with the person face to face and have a live, in the moment, interaction with them. It is email. Often, unfortunately, is detrimental to the healthy functioning of a team.
Especially when people CC every man and his dog. It's almost like a bullying tactic, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah. It is. When you start CCing your boss and their boss, those types of things, it really does become a passive-aggressive way of working through conflict.
Yeah, it's ugly. Mind you, if you have screamed around the office naked, maybe you deserve that kind of attention. What are some of the other symptoms of a dysfunctional team?
Well, there is a lack of accountability. So if the team really is serious about winning, then if you don't have commitment, then you're not going to have a high degree of focus on accountability. We don't look each other in the eye and say, hey, what about that you were supposed to deliver last Friday, which, is we avoid it, we tip around it. And then ultimately, the fifth dysfunction of a team is a lack of focus on results. And so if you really are serious about performing, then you have the tough conversations about what we need to do to get things across the line. But sometimes teams almost operate more like a social club. The business is secondary. The customers are secondary. The key stakeholders are secondary to what we need to do. And so teams sometimes do lose perspective on what we're really here for, which is to win, which is to succeed, which is to deliver. And, ultimately deliver the results that you say you want to deliver.
Is some of this dysfunctionality you see in teams that you work with in the corporate world as an advisor to them, is it because we want to be liked by everybody? Oh, I'm not going to say that because then they won't like me, so I'll just shut up.
There is a human need to be needed, this notion of affiliation. So we, as humans, we are just naturally social. And so the idea of congregating or pulling together as a team around, focusing on an objective is important. It is part of what humans do. But, to the point we talking about a little bit earlier, you do have to fit in but not lose yourself. Sometimes sometimes team leaders regard a quiet team as a good team. And that is, if I can turn the volume down on all of your voices so that all you're doing is nodding yes to what I say, that's a good team.
That's a dictator.
That's a dictator. But there are some people who believe that a quiet team is a good team. And I often say you want to be very concerned as a team leader if your team is quiet, because you hire people for their perspective and their experience, and that comes with a voice. And so if you've got a team that's on mute, you want to ask yourself whether or not you really are leveraging their insights, their perspective. And I like a noisy team. A noisy team is a good team.
People generally don't leave jobs because of the job. They leave jobs because of the people.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That old adage, people don't leave, what is it? People don't leave companies. They leave bad bosses.
Oh, that's the one I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
I was trying to sound clever.
Yeah.
So is there an acceptable level of dysfunction that a team should just expect to live with?
Humans are humans. And so, just sort of the inherent tensions. But there is a point to which then the dynamic becomes destructive and begins to work against performance. We spend a lot of time at work, for the average person who works a full week. That's a lot of time to plug into something that is negative and in the sense of a team. So it is important just around this whole thing that we call engagement, employee engagement. People are more engaged with their work if they walk in and have a positive experience with the people around them.
I totally agree, yeah. Do you need an expert to help fix your really stuffed up dysfunctional team, or can you kind of sort it out yourself?
You can sort it out yourself. Yeah. I often tell teams that my objective as a coach is to not be in their space in a year's time, because I'd like to equip them with the ability to just have constructive conversations. And so you don't necessarily need a person like me to come in to work with a team. You can, I would suggest to people, read the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Good place
and
to start.
have a conversation. Have
Good
a conversation as a team.
Or they can contact you. And how do they do that, Harold?
I'm at www.sigmoidcurve.com.
Nice. Always nice to catch up with you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, won't you?
Good to see you, Roman.
You too.